My name is Natalie Bubenheim, and I'm going to be discussing a scene from the movie Les Miserables. It was originally a musical, but my scene is from the 2012 motion picture. So just to start, to give a summary of the movie, well, the actual plot line of Les Mis is pretty complex, and there's a lot of different characters and storylines, so it can get kind of complicated if you've never seen it before. So I'm just going to stick to summarizing the portion that involves my scene. And the scene I'm doing is the final fight scene between the revolutionaries and the French army. So I'll just be discussing whenever the revolutionaries come into the movie. So that'll be like, it's kind of like near the middle of the movie. It'll fast forward a couple years and it'll be June of 1833. And this was just after the French Revolution. So the condition of France was very poor. There was a lot of civil unrest and disturbances. And basically at this time, the rich people were super rich and the poor people were super poor, and there really wasn't any middle class at all. So you basically just had like really rich like aristocrats and then beggars on the streets, and they didn't help them at all. So this obviously made those who were poor in France very angry. And in the movie they sing about cutting the fat ones down to size, so they just kind of want to even out the wealth of the country. So in the movie, two students, Enjolras and Marius, who are pictured there, they discuss forming a revolution in order to overthrow the government. The timing of this is right as General Lamarck, who is the only government official who is sympathetic towards the poor, he's nearing his death. So they feel this is the best time to start planning it. And Enjolras actually organizes a group of students for the revolution, and they all meet at a cafe, and that's where the death of General Lamarck is announced. So they make plans to begin the revolution at his funeral procession the next day, and they do, and that's where they begin their assault, and they build a barricade in the streets in order to fight behind. Although the majority of the residents of Paris did not join in with the revolution as they had originally expected, so they had to resolve to fight to the death, and once the government troops do arrive, they end up all being killed. And so just that final scene is the scene I'm going to be discussing today. The music of Les Mis was composed by Claude Michael Schoenberg with the lyrics written by Alain Boublil, and it was just all based on a book by Victor Hugo. Schoenberg was a French composer born in 1944, and he is still living today. His other works include La Révolution Française, Miss Saigon, and Martin Guerre. Upon graduation from school, he worked as a producer and a junior artistic director for Pathé Marconi, before resigning to compose with lyricist Alain Boublil in 1972. And actually all four of his major works were a collaboration with Alain. They began to work on Les Mis in 1979, bringing Victor Hugo's book to the stage. It appeared in dozens of international productions, being named arguably the greatest musical success of the musical stage. And then just a fun fact about Schoenberg is that he's actually a self-taught composer, and he is able to play and record his melodies, but he's actually not able to notate them. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So the film scene depicts the final battle between the revolutionaries and the French army, and it makes heavy use of brass in the instrumentation. The brass melodies behind the fighting are powerful and add to the intensity of the battle. The earliest use of brass was by trumpeters for heralding, which is signaling that something is about to happen. And the brass plays a similar role in this scene. And then the strong use of low brass, which is known to be ominous, dark, and evil, shows that something bad is going to happen, which we later find out is the revolutionaries being killed. And then the original use of horns was for hunting, and it's still similar in this scene, since a battle can be related to hunting if you look at like the focusing and shooting of a target. And then something that I found interesting about this scene is that you don't really notice a lot of percussion in it, although that usually is common in battle scenes. And this could just be due to the fact that it blends in with the gunshots and the cannon sounds and you just don't notice them. Or it could be that Schoenberg didn't find them necessary to the scene since the troops aren't marching in for battle, and that since the tempo in the background isn't a strict tempo, it just kind of changes with how the fighting is occurring. So the film scene begins with the French officer addressing the students of the barricade, and he begins with a declarative and serious recitative, where he says, "People of the barricades, listen to this. The people of Paris sleep in their beds. You have no chance." And then right there, his melody kind of becomes slightly more lyrical, and he kind of is more welcoming and sympathetic to them, trying to say, "You have no chance at all. Why throw your lives away?" Kind of trying to give them one more chance to just surrender and save themselves, since they're clearly outnumbered by the troops. But the revolutionaries answer back to them with phrases like, "Let us die facing our foes, make them pay for every man, let others rise to take our place until the earth is free." Just kind of showing that even though they know they're probably going to die, they still want to fight, and they are hopeful that if they do die here at the at the barricade, others will follow in their footsteps later and continue their fight and improve the conditions of Paris. And just basically shows that they would rather die against them than to surrender to the conditions of the French government, because if the conditions don't improve, they're just going to be dead anyway. And then something to note is that the final note that he sings when he sings "The Earth is Free," the final note is a high note, and it's backed by high brass, which relates to nobility. And it's just very hopeful and proud, and shows the revolutionaries as being the nobles. And then the music is instantly darker after that, with low brass accompanying the French government's response. And the low sounds are ominous, showing the French government to be the bad guys in the situation. And then further in that, every time the French army advances towards the revolutionaries, the music is heavy with low brass, and it becomes very dark. But when they show the revolutionaries fighting back, or even when they're dying, the music is high brass, giving a noble feeling, even when they're being killed, which is something that I found interesting, because normally you think that that's when the music would be darkest, is when they're dying and beginning to lose. But he keeps it with the high brass sounding triumphant, and I think this is because they're just so passionate about their cause, and that they feel okay dying for their cause, that they see it as a heroic gesture, and they still feel like they're making a difference even if they are dying. The music at the beginning of the battle includes a melody from a song called "Look Down" that is sung at the beginning of the movie by prisoners. And it is then brought back when it fast forwards to the 1833, and the beggars of Paris sing it with different words but the same melody, just kind of showing how they feel like prisoners in their country. So I think it's significant that it's brought back at the very beginning of this scene, as just kind of a reminder to the audience of the scene where they were talking about the conditions of France, and then even the further scene how they feel like prisoners there. And then another melody that's brought back is from a song called "ABC Cafe."